Okay, good people. Good late afternoon, or I guess it's evening by now for pretty much everybody who watches my videos. So, good evening. We've got more pro football focused stuff to take a look at here today. We've got some more grades, some more scores, some more evaluations. And now we're going to do the defensive side of the ball. Certainly, last night, the defense was the less impressive side of the ball, but it was still pretty good. I still think there's a lot more to be excited about defensively than concerned about. And look, the Chiefs didn't have Mahomes, didn't have Kelsey, didn't have some of their key wide receivers, some of their likely starting wide receivers. They did have their starting offensive line out there, though. They did have Pachenko out there for a little bit. So it's not cut and dry the way that some people might paint it. I understand. They didn't have their best player. They didn't have their future Hall of Fame tight end, but I took something away from that performance last night because Chiefs barely moved the ball. They had like 150, 160 yards of offense, and the weather played a factor, but the Seahawks, they had almost 500 yards of offense, so they did something right. They did something very right. Remember, one of the Chiefs' touchdowns was on the punt return. So, really, the Chiefs' offense did very little actual damage in this game. They had the one drive that ended in the Tonyan touchdown. Other than that, we kept him on lockdown, and I want to see what Pro Football Focus has to say about this group. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Pro Football Focus is always going to get it right. I'm also not one of those people that tells you that Pro Football Focus always gets it wrong. I don't think either statement is true. They do a lot of hard work. They do a lot of good work. I will admit that I think on the defensive side of the ball, they have some real holes. Sorry if you can hear my dog, by the way. But they got some real holes on the defense, especially when it comes to zone. Things like safety, things like linebacker, zone corners. It's very hard for them to decipher what is going on, I think. So I admit that. Doesn't mean it's not worth looking at. Let's do it. Like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're new. Click the bell for notifications. Become a channel member for $2 a month. Those are the best ways to support the channel. Now, right away, we run into a little bit of a problem. Most of the players that are graded really highly on this chart did not play that much. We have Kobe Bryant, Boye Mafe, and Isis Waxter as 3 of our 5 highest graded players, and they played 10 snaps or fewer. Now, that's not to say there's nothing to give them credit for, because clearly they did something well out there. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into maybe why later, but they didn't play that much. And the other 2 guys in the top 5 played less than 14 or less than 15. But nevertheless, Jarek Reed really stands out here. This is a guy, 14 snaps, that's not nothing. And 90.9, by far the highest graded player on defense. And he's fighting for his roster spot. And he's fighting for it against Ty Okada. And we'll talk more about Ty Okada later in this video. But if you were to pick a winner based on what happened last night, it's not very close. It's not even competitive. The other highly graded defender was Brandon Peely, which makes sense. You register a safety and you also pick up a quarterback pressure, you're going to be up there. You definitely did something worthy of a good Pro Football Focus grade. So no surprises there. But even him, 13 snaps, it's not a big set of data. I think the thing that really stands out to me, because this is so important, would be Drake Thomas. Drake Thomas, because on 23 snaps, he held his grade. He was graded well in every category, 75 overall. And that is a guy who could be important to this team. So this is a moment where a guy like Drake Thomas needs to stand out in a positive way. And last night, he did. And I can't say the same for a guy like Pat O'Connell, who is in a similar position. So maybe we're getting some separation there. Maybe we're getting an idea of what we need and what we don't need. But Drake Thomas, I like what I see there. J.R. Singleton graded well, which is nice because he's a nose tackle, which we might need, but 7 snaps. Demarion Williams, I think that part of the reason why this grade is so good is because he got away with a penalty that I think he didn't get called on. Instead, that penalty went on Okada, which I didn't agree with. Maybe I could have my mind changed on that. But he was graded quite well, mostly for coverage stuff. We'll take a look at the coverage stuff a little bit closer later in this video. Julian Love, 10 snaps. Tuputala graded well, but 6 snaps. Jared Ivey shows up again. He's really making a push to be an important member of this team in 2025. Josh Jobe, well graded. Tyler Hall, Seth Coleman, Nehemiah Pritchett, who I didn't really notice last night. I was kind of hoping he would make some kind of a bigger impact. Still graded pretty well. And I think what that represents is that he's settling in here and starting to kind of provide some stability, which is more important than the ability to occasionally make a play. And that indicates to me, on some level, that his roster spot is fairly safe. We didn't feel the need to play him a lot last night. If he was trying to fight for his roster spot, you'd think he played more than 16 snaps. Witherspoon, pretty good. Murphy, pretty good. Shaq Griffin, only 9 snaps, so he's just kind of getting warmed up, but he didn't do anything untenably bad, so that's encouraging. Derek Hall, Keydrain Callaghan, Pat O'Connell. Even Pat O'Connell had a passable grade. Reek Woolen, 10 snaps, passable grade. Jamie Sheriff, De'Eric Jackson. We got to get all the way down here. 24 players that are above the kind of cutoff point between good and bad, if there is such a thing. 11 players scored above a 71, but you've got 24 players scoring above a 60. PFF approves of that, is what I'm trying to say here. And of the players that scored in some kind of concerning capacity, DeAnthony Bell, that's not great. What I would say, though, is that he's mostly here for special teams, and we'll talk about that later. Ernest Jones was pretty poor, right? Ernest Jones scored pretty badly, mostly because he didn't play that much and he missed a tackle. And when you are a linebacker and you only play 10 snaps and you miss a tackle on one of those plays, you can forget about it. It's really tough to overcome. Mike Morris, who I actually thought did some nice things last night, 51.2, and that might be a case of PFF just not representing reality very well, but it is worth noting that they don't think he's doing a very good job from snap to snap. Ty Okada, one of the worst grades on the team. And again, he is in a competition with Jarek Reed for that last safety spot, I think. Look at where Jarek Reed is right now. It's worth noting. Emin Wari, really bad, mostly because of coverage stuff. We'll take a look at the coverage metrics a little bit later in this video. I didn't really notice him do anything alarmingly bad, but it is worth noting they thought he played a bad game. Bohanna, they graded very poorly. That's a guy who has a unique opportunity right now with Hankins out. Based on this grading, not really taking advantage of it. He missed his one chance at a tackle last night, so I can kind of understand where that comes from. That's most of the stuff that is notable, like Anthony Campbell and Bubba Thomas are not going to make this team. But overall, it's good, right? We see a lot of the starters get slightly above average grades in this game because they didn't play that much, and their goal is not to go out there and look amazing and do something over the top great. Their goal is to get out there just to get out there and get into the right mental place and physical place to be great in a few weeks. That's the overall big picture here. There were 5 missed tackles, which, again, pretty good. 5 missed tackles in a game. We would have that many in a quarter sometimes in the late days of Pete Carroll. 1 for Demarion Williams, 1 for Tyler Hall, 1 for Ernest Jones, 1 for Ty Okada, 1 for Quinton Bohanna. Some of those players, you'd prefer they not miss tackles, but 5 missed tackles in a game, I am certainly willing to live with that. Again, sometimes it seems like the Seahawks will miss more than 5 tackles on a play back in the old days of Pete Carroll. All right, drilling down a little bit, let's start with the run defense. There's nothing really super illuminating here. I think the thing that might concern you a little bit is that we had 2 nose tackles that were graded by far the worst of any nose tackle against the run, which you don't love that because this is a moment where those guys could be separating themselves positively. Instead, they're separating themselves negatively. And some of this is because there weren't a lot of opportunities. The only player on this team that had 10 or more, or exactly 10 actually, run defense snaps was Pat O'Connell. Everybody else had 9 or fewer. So there's not a lot of opportunities for these guys, but nobody had more than 1 stop. And O'Connell, Mafe, Peely, Emin Wari, O'Toole, Love, those were the guys who came up with those run stops. But nobody stood out in some over-the-top way. The best thing we had was probably O'Connell, who had 4 tackles against the run. Average depth of tackle was 4, which is okay. Peely, obviously, with his safety, he's going to stand out pretty good. Mafe gets his run stop 2 yards down the field. D'Anthony Bell, same thing here. But there's really not much to say here that you're taking a lot of meaning away from. It's just normal stuff when you're subbing players in and out constantly and nobody's getting a ton of opportunities. When we get to the regular season and a guy like Ernest Jones is out there for 25 maybe run snaps a game, he's going to get way more stops. So that's the run defense, pretty simple. Pass rush grades, pass rush stuff. This was not a great day for the pass rush, I don't think, and you can see how even the distribution of scores are. You've got some green, you've got yellow, you've got orange. You don't really get down into red, which is nice, I guess, but you can see that it's a pretty even distribution. The 2 guys who stood out, Murphy and Ivy. Murphy getting 2 pressures on 6 snaps is really great because that's a crazy good win rate. Now, again, it's preseason, but again, he is going up against the starting Chiefs offensive line. They had Creed Humphrey out there. They had their guys out there. So I take something away from that. And Jared Ivey, this is a guy we've been talking about a lot lately, trying to earn that PT, trying to earn that 4th edge role until Nwosu gets back. This is only going to help. His pass rushing ability that he's showing, it's more than you would have expected. Normally, you would have just been content with him simply holding his own against the run. Right now, we're getting a little bit more than that. Had a few other guys come up with the pressure. Drake Thomas, Brandon Peely, those are the 2 guys who really stand out for me. Seth Coleman had the 1 actual defensive sack, which, great, but again, long odds to make this roster. I think the Drake Thomas one is interesting to me because he's a guy who I think will make the roster by default, and we need him to do something. Mike Morris with 2 pressures, but for some reason still graded poorly. Kind of interesting. I guess he had a lot of opportunities, and his win rate wasn't that high, so it's not all great, but it's still like, I don't know. It seems a little bit over the top to me. D'Anthony Bell with another pressure coming up from the safety spot. Still doesn't get graded all that well. Figure it out. I can't figure that one out off the top of my head. Nobody who's really super stand out the way Ivy was the last week, right? Two pressures from 3 players. 1 pressure from a bunch of other players. That's your pass rush. Coverage stuff. Let's take a look here because this might answer some of our questions about the things that happened in this game. The good coverage grades, Jarek Reed, Tyler Hall, Isis Waxter, Kobe Bryant. You can see a lot of these guys are either not getting targeted or they get targeted and don't really allow anything. Demarion Williams gives up 2 completions for 3 yards. That's a winner right there. Average depth of tackle, 6 yards in the backfield. That's a winner right there. Feeling pretty good about that. And you get through some of this stuff. You look at the bottom and you can see why Emin Wari got dinged. Okay, they gave him 2 completions, 30 yards. That's not good on 8 coverage snaps. You definitely want to see a little bit better than that. And I can understand why, if that is the way they graded it out, especially with the 25-yard completion, they dinged Emin Wari pretty heavily. Now, I'd have to go back and look at those plays. Is Emin Wari really doing anything all that wrong, or is it just a good play by the offense? I don't know. But it helps illuminate the way Pro Football Focus is looking at things. O'Connell, another rough game in coverage. He just doesn't really have the speed or agility to do it, I don't think. Ernest Jones gives up a decent-sized completion, a 14-yarder. Not great. But again, small sample size. Okada, a couple of completions. Not huge damage, but again, we're comparing him to a guy like Jarek Reed, who doesn't get targeted at all in this game on not fewer snaps, but still a meaningful amount of snaps. Woolen gets targeted twice in this game, 1 completion, 3 yards. Fine by me. And everything else pretty quiet, so nobody really stands out in some super over-the-top negative way. I'm not overly alarmed by anything here. Again, Emin Wari probably had the most notably bad day, but I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. He's still a rookie, guys. He's very young. This is a guy who was a 3-year player in college. There's going to be problems. That's really it for the defense. I do want to spend a few minutes on special teams here, though, because this is something that was a problem yesterday, and I think it's good to try to understand why there may have been a problem. And let's see who isn't a problem. D'Anthony Bell and Jarek Reed were the two highest graded special teamers for the Seahawks last night. I thought that D'Anthony Bell was the guy who got out of position on that Chiefs kick return that got back to the 50. So this surprised me a little bit, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was looking at things the wrong way. Maybe it wasn't his responsibility. I'm going to have to go back and look at that now after seeing this, because they thought he was our best special teamer. Jarek Reed up there as well, Derek Young, Cody White. These are guys who are going to benefit tremendously from being valuable special teamers. Jacardia Wright. He's probably fighting for the practice squad, but this is going to help him make it. Jared Ivey, this is a way he can push himself over the edge. Brady Russell, only one snap, I guess, but he made the tackle. And it doesn't seem all that bad. We have a lot of players that are just kind of hanging around in that 60 range, not much to say. Here are the guys that PFF thinks are the problems. One is Drake Thomas, which that is tragic. I don't like that. I don't like that because, again, he needs to do little extra things to prove that he is worthy of a roster spot. And things like this are not going to help. He, worst graded special teamer. De'Aaron Jackson, they dinged him for a missed tackle, so he's down here as well. Tyrone Broden dinged for a missed tackle. He's pretty far down here. I'm not worried about Zach Schreiner. He's not going to be on the team unless the injury to Stoll is really, really big. Ty Okada, though, pretty not good. 56.6 down here. That's concerning because, again, he's in competition with Jarek Reed. He's trying to win a job on this team against Jarek Reed. And look how much better Jarek Reed looked this week. That's really about it in terms of stuff that I think is compelling to look at. I'm not going to judge the punt return stuff until Torrey Horton's healthy out there. I didn't see him return any punts this week. But everything else is just kind of anonymous. And that's going to do it for our look at Pro Football Focus grading this week. Let me know what you think down below. I will see you guys later. Go Hawks. Everybody have a great rest of your evening. Should be on Twitch later. And we're getting closer.